If you have taken a Myers-Briggs Personality Test, they have assigned you a 4-letter code that designates you as one of 16 personality types. You may have discovered that it is considered the most popular personality test in the world and has a vast internet-based culture surrounding it, full of blogs, YouTube videos, explanatory websites, companies, a bazillion different free tests, and a lot of argument about which celebrity is which type. There's also a great deal of controversy about the meaning of Myers-Briggs terms. You hear one authoritative definition of extroversion from one website, and another from another website, and yet another from another website, all similar but all a little too different. You may also have observed weaknesses, contradictions, problems, or biases in the theory or in people's interpretations of the theory that have turned you off of Myers-Briggs forever. I have found that a proper understanding of Myers-Briggs comes from a proper understanding of its foundation, Jungian typology. I have found that Jung offers incredibly rich insight into understanding Myers-Briggs and helps clear up a lot of potential problems and biases that exist in the typology culture. As you can probably tell by the quality of my recording equipment, I am not an expert in Jungian typology, or even a pure Jungian, actually. I am just a concerned observer who has found great insight into understanding Myers-Briggs and clarification into its terms, and I hope that these videos will offer the same insight and clarification for you. So, to begin, allow me to give a very brief history of typology. So there was this Swiss guy named Carl Gustav Jung. You've probably heard of his mentor and buddy Sigmund Freud. Together, these two spearheaded the development of psychology as we know it today. Many of their original ideas are not taken seriously by modern psychologists, and thank heavens for that, but they were the first ones to really dig into psychology and make it well known. Carl Jung wrote this one book called Psychological Types, and in chapter 10 he describes the patterns he's observed among his various patients. These patterns of behavior and the subsequent labels he gave them form the original basis of personality typology and the Myers-Briggs test. Those original patterns were the attitudes, extroversion versus introversion, and the functions, thinking versus feeling, and sensation versus intuition. He then combined the attitudes with each of the functions and formed 8 psychological types: extroverted thinking versus introverted thinking, extroverted feeling versus introverted feeling, extroverted sensation versus introverted sensation, and extroverted intuition versus introverted intuition. However, Jung got distracted with his other really cool idea called archetypes and left personality types alone. It sort of sat around and collected dust for a while until a lady and her daughter, named respectively Catherine Cook Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers, started studying it and said, "Whoa, this totally describes how people work." They then began standardizing and extrapolating Jung's original ideas into a test that people could take and determine more easily what personality they were. This was the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and you probably took some version of it. Based on some statements and theories by Jung, Briggs and Myers based the test on the idea that individuals will prefer not just one of the 8 psychological types, but will always have a secondarily preferred type underneath it to balance it out. When you do the arithmetic, this doubles the number of types to 16. Isabel Myers described the standardization of Jung's work and the nature of the 16 types in her book Gifts Differing. Then a little later, this guy named David Keirsey came along and made the Myers-Briggs type indicator explosively popular when he published Please Understand Me Too, which further extrapolates and standardizes Jung's original work by organizing the 16 types into 4 main categories: SJs, or guardians, SPs, or artisans, NFs, or idealists, and NTs, or rationals. While he originally used the letter codes developed by Briggs and Myers to describe his types, his theory and foundation is actually completely different from Jung's and Myers, but is misunderstood as an added development onto their work. So, some final thoughts. Jung's original work is complicated, ambiguous, difficult to read, and wasn't meant to be made into a standardized test for the public. However, when I based my understanding of Myers-Briggs on the original words and foundations set by Jung, I found the ideas in Myers-Briggs hold up a lot better, make more sense, say more interesting stuff about more topics, and are a lot richer and deeper in content. One of the reasons for this is because Jung's original work was not behaviorist. Behaviorism, in a nutshell, means psychology that studies a person's behavior in the world to determine what must be going on inside their brain. This allows psychology to be more specific and testable. But Jung did the opposite, studying what people described was going on inside their brain to determine why they behaved a certain way in the world. The difference is subtle but important. Two people might have similar processes going on inside their brain, but depending on their circumstances they may act in two different ways even though the cause is the same. The problem is many of the questions used in Internet Myers-Briggs tests are purely behaviorist, and many descriptions and definitions offered by people on the Internet for the 16 types are purely behaviorist. While behaviors can be extrapolated from Jung's work, they do not appear to be the foundation of his work. So now a final word. I use typology not just to understand myself, but to understand the people around me, and even to understand the many philosophies in the world. When I don't have any way to appreciate and understand other methods of thought other than my own, then I have an easier time assuming the people who don't agree with me are just behind the curve I already rounded, that their opinion must be inferior to mine. It's easier to only see the cons of their argument, but with typology I can better appreciate the pros and the cons of both our arguments. Typology does not account for everything in personality, but what it talks about very well, and can shed invaluable insight into where other people are coming from, where we're coming from, and the pros and cons of each position. So did you get all that? Okay, let's go to lesson 2.